May Jesus be praised and honored with Mary. Good and holy day to all of you, dear children, in the sacred hearts of Jesus and Mary, and in the most chaste heart of Saint Joseph. Welcome back to our morning segment, Saints and Coffee. Today is Thursday, the 13th of March. We are in the first week of Lent, the week of Jesus' temptations in the desert, where he triumphs over Satan as saint, so that we might also triumph. Our Christian life is a struggle. It is a battle against the power of evil that besieges us, that exploits the wound of original sin to try to lead us away from God through the allure of the world, through the calls of the flesh, through temptations. And we must resist. We must resist with the strength of faith nourished by prayer. We must resist with the grace of God granted to us through the sacraments. Today, in the Gospel of this Thursday of the first week of Lent, in the context of the Ember Days, we are presented with the very evocative Gospel passage of the Syrophoenician woman who implores Jesus, insisting that he heal her demon-possessed daughter. And Jesus yields. Jesus allows himself to be overcome by this woman's faith, praising her. We must ask ourselves, in these days, the early days of Lent, how is our faith? At what point is our journey of faith? Does the Holy Virgin help us in this? Maria, the Madonna, is mother and teacher of faith. She accompanies us and does not leave us alone, especially when we consecrate ourselves to her, and with the Holy Rosary we unite with her Immaculate Heart. Please, could you close the curtain a bit, because the sun has come out and it's casting a shadow on me. Today is Thursday, the 13th of March, and therefore there is the appointment, as you know, this afternoon in Bergamo. I hope many of you will come. You know that I have been making these appeals more frequently lately, primarily because we are in the year of the Rosary. And then especially because in this year of the Rosary, events are escalating. The global geopolitical chessboard is in turmoil. Happenings occur one after another. We do not know exactly where they might lead. Prayer is essential. On the 13th of every month, we gather in prayer for Russia. So today is a call to all those who can come. At 4 o'clock at the San Sisto Auditorium, Via della Vittoria 1 in Bergamo. We will do something different from the usual program, which is to expose the Blessed Sacrament at the beginning. Father Celestino has consecrated the Great Host. He keeps it with him for this afternoon. Thus, at 4 o'clock, we will expose the Blessed Sacrament and recite the Holy Rosary live on Radio for Russia in front of Jesus Santa. And those of you who can, join us from home, especially the Sentinels of Betania, because today is Thursday. Those who cannot and those who do not connect but can, come to the meeting. We are expecting many of you not to make up numbers, but to say that the small remnant responds to the calls of heaven through this humble instrument speaking to you. The Madonna is waiting for us. She's already there at the auditorium. The Madonna who waits for us, precedes us, accompanies us. So come and do not miss this precious appointment that we will make. This afternoon at 4 o'clock. Then, concurrently with this evening at 9 o'clock, as you know, there is the catechesis from my book, The Symphony of the Lamb on the Apocalypse, which is available. You can ask at the office or collect it at the prayer meetings. The next one is the 25th episode, and we'll see each other. To delve deeper into chapter 12, I would say it is quite significant and providential, who speaks of the sun-clad woman and the red dragon. Here is the title for this evening, The Woman Clothed with the Sun, Fatima. In Russia, this is the post. Share. It will be live on the YouTube channel of Radio Domina Nostra. But for those who want it, we will be there at the San Auditorium. What's its name? Auditorium? San Biagio. No, San Sisto, at the Musal Sisto area at 9 o'clock in the evening for the catechesis. This catechesis is the one on the Apocalypse. However, since today is the day to pray for Russia, it seemed necessary to me, as I have actually already done. Last Thursday, connect the message of Fatima, of the woman clothed with the sun, to the theme of Fatima. And Russia, which is very dear to me, because, dear children, you must know one thing for those who trust me. Here we are not only refusing to accept that Bergoglio is the Pope, but consequently a whole other series of things, such as dismissing the Fatima and Russia affair as it has been done. And this is Satan's victory. I mean, I would like the fellow brothers, not those of the sodality, because they know, but the other priests, if they still had the courage to listen to me and did not get upset because I know that I upset because I shout the truth, to understand one important thing. The Freemasons have decided to liquidate the Fatima affair. By making Russia appear consecrated, this is Satan's victory. If Russia isn't consecrated, it's Satan's win. What are we discussing? We need to focus there. Well, they are the faithful of the small remnant, those whom perhaps we, first of all, consider fanatics, extremists, exaggerated, excessive. I venerate those ones. The faithful of the small remnant who speak of the consecration of Russia, the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, the great prelate, those things there, they venerate. I must tell you this, why? The very serious risk is that, as I am foreshadowing the topic of this evening, the Russia affair, given the current situation, will evidently be definitively stifled. Bergoglio, I remind you, he is always there, between life and death. Now he is recovering. He will soon leave and return to Santa Marta. And as I was saying, Bergoglio, he is the one who on the 25th of March 2022 performed the consecration of Russia. Why shouldn't we be able to do it too, as we did for Italy? I'm starting to think about a very simple idea. When does the small remnant gather? Wednesday, the 25th of March. I don't know if it's Thursday in Terni, in a very simple way, but I miss it. Let's write the text. We say, Holy Madonna, we consecrate you, Russia. We do it with a bit of Neapolitan language, just to give the idea that since they put on a show, we are having fun too. And then we'll see, though. I stop here. See you tonight for catechesis. Yesterday evening, Father Enrico began an extraordinary reflection on the magisterium of the family. Well done, Don Enrico. In case it is needed, on behalf of all of us, we are grateful for what you have already started to say. Yesterday evening, I invite you to listen to it. You can find it on the playlist of Radio Domina Nostra. An excellent introductory reflection on this theme of the magisterium on the family. Here, today I was telling you that at 4 o'clock there are the sentinels. Then I remember the 2 upcoming appointments, and that is, I asked to close the curtain a bit more, unfortunately, because the sun is shining in my face. And that is Saturday, we are Saturday. Saturday the 15th, practically the day after tomorrow, we are in Genoa, at the Hotel Mercure San Biagio, here in Rome Iron 14, with the small remainder of Liguria. And on Sunday the 16th, we are in Bologna, at the Hotel Amatide. I heard from the collaborators that there in Emilia-Romagna, the hall is already completely full. However, some people can also stand. It's a good sign. The room is already completely full. At the Hotel Amatide Design, the program is both on Saturday in Genoa and on Sunday in Bologna. Confessions are scheduled for those who have not yet managed to do so in preparation for Easter. And then again, the Rosary, the consecration to the Madonna, the submissive, the moment of Eucharistic adoration, the submissive Sunday, especially as it is the second Sunday of Lent, that of the Transfiguration of Jesus, because Lent is going into the desert for temptations, but Lent is also climbing the table of prayer, of contemplation, of the adoration of God. So, moments of grace await us naturally. The highlight, however, I remind you, is that of next Wednesday. There he is in Verona, in Bussolengo. It is the solemnity of St. Joseph. It is the last celebration before Brother Celestino and I go to the central south. More or less because apart from the appointment between Ancona, Osimo, and Florence, then gradually we go down on the 25th of March. We're in Terni and so on, in Abruzzo, in Puglia, in Naples. I would like to extend my best wishes to all the faithful of the small remnant who are in the north, who can come, who are organizing themselves, even though I naturally understand that it is a weekday, and therefore it is not possible for everyone to be present. Because indeed, it is neither Saturday nor Sunday. There will be the blessing of fathers, the blessing of workers, the distribution of the scapular of St. Joseph, but above all, I would say, the distribution of the bread. Blessed and exorcised. Do not miss this free appointment with no need for reservation. Next Wednesday, Solemnity Feast of St. Joseph, we will also make the consecration of the Little Rest to St. Joseph. If you happen to notice the gradual shifting of light and shadow in a delicate dance, it is simply because the sun is slowly peeking through the clouds. Today where I am, therefore, There is no problem.
c'è
All
problema.
right,
Allora ci
see you
vediamo
this
il 12
afternoon in
Bergamo
Bergamo
per il
for the rosary
rosario
in
in
support
favore
of
della
Russia.
Russia.
Let's
Invece
move on
abbiamo
to today's
l'appuntamento di oggi
appointment,
che è ricco
which
di
is full of
iniziative, senza però
initiatives.
aver dimenticato
Without forgetting to
di
help,
aiutare
the appeal to
l'appello
support the
all'aiuto del
project we are carrying
progetto
out,
che stiamo
which needs
portando
the
avanti, che ha
support of
bisogno del
all of
sostegno di
you.
tutti voi,
Thanks to
grazie a
those
quelli che
moderately but
discretamente ma
punctually, they go
puntualmente
to
si
the
recano
bank
agli sportelli
counters to
bancari
help
per
the
aiutare
Radio
il
Domina and the
radio del
Small
progetto
Change Project.
del piccolo resto.
Here,
Ecco,
the
l'IBAN, il
IBAN,
conto
the
corrente
postal current
postale, la
account,
PayPal,
PayPal,
la
all of you
PayPal,
know
tutti
that
voi
this
sapete
work is
che
being
quest'opera
invested,
viene
and we're
investita
looking to
e
start the
stiamo
work in
vedendo di
𝐵𝐵𝐶𝐵𝐵 as soon
iniziare
as
questi
possible.
lavori a Trebaseleghe,
But we
ma
still lack that
ci manca
necessary help
quell'aiuto
to start
necessario per
everything,
avviare tutto
because
perché
what
quello
is
che
coming
arriva
in
è
is just
appena
barely enough to
sufficiente
keep
per
all the
tenere in piedi
initiatives we
tutte le
are undertaking
iniziative che
going.
stiamo affrontando e voi
I think you all
penso
know
che
that.
lo sappiate.
I
Bene,
think I
ma vi ho
mentioned
detto che
tonight's
questa sera abbiamo
catechesis. Yes, I
catechesi,
did
l'ho
at 9
detto,
o'clock.
alle ore
However,
21
we'll repost
vi
it so you can
proponiamo il
share,
post,
share, share,
così lo
share.
condividete,
At
condividete,
9 o'clock,
condividete,
the woman
condividete.
saw
Abbiamo
the
presentato
sun,
una donna vissuta
Fatima
sulle
and
falde nella
Russia,
Russia, un tema
an absolutely very
assolutamente
important topic.
importantissimo.
Let's
Andiamo
move
al
on
tema
to
di oggi
today's
che
topic, which
affronta molte
addresses many
questioni
issues to
per
take
fare un
stock
po'
of the
il punto della
situation.
situazione.
Now, the
Adesso la
production is
regia
presenting the
propone
title,
il titolo,
Today's Window.
la
Wait a few
finestra
more
di
moments
oggi.
and you will
Aspettate ancora
see it.
qualche istante, lo vedrete.
This
Questo
title is
titolo è
broad,
ampio,
but it
ma
encapsulates
mette
everything I
su
wanted
tutto
to
quello di cui
talk to you
volevo
about this
parlarvi questa
morning.
mattina,
If the
sempre
production
se la
team
regia
manages to
fa
show
in
the
tempo a
title in
postare
time,
il titolo.
let's wait a few more
Aspettiamo
moments
ancora
to
qualche
see it.
istante per vederlo.
Today is
Questa è
a
una
day of
giornata di
prayer,
preghiera,
even for
anche
those
perché
at
sarete
home.
a casa,
Join us
potete
at
venire qua a stare
1600
seduti
hours
per
to
ricevuto
recite
il
the
rosario con
rosary
noi.
with
Leggi è il
us,
titolo,
directed by the title.
unitevi a noi alle 16
Join us
per
at
pregare il
1600
Santo
hours to pray the
Rosario
Holy
a
Rosary from
Bergamo, in
Bergamo,
modo tale
so
che
that you too at
possiate
home can
anche voi
feel
a
like
casa sentirvi
co-protagonists.
coprotagonisti. A me il
Title's
titolo
missing,
non
I'll
arriva,
say
ve
it
lo dico
anyway.
lo stesso.
The
Il
Massacre in
massacro di
Syria fra
Siria, la
Celestino'S reply
Repubblica
𝐤'𝐶𝐚𝐺
Celestino, la fantasia
imagination.
di Cionci'.
Here's the
Eccolo
title,
lì,
details
dopo ve
later.
l'ho detto.
The
Il
Massacre in
massacro di
Syria fra
Siria, la
Celestino's
replicas fra
response,
Celestino, la
𝐤'𝐶𝐚𝐺
fantasia di
imagination.
Cionci'.
The
Si
topics are
tratta
naturally
naturalmente di
three
tre
different
tematiche
ones, especially the
diverse,
first
soprattutto la
one, but
prima. Però
naturally,
non è
this is not a news
non è un
bulletin, one morning
gazettino di
rather. It is often a
mattina, anzi
moment of
è un momento
reflection,
molte
of
volte di
prayer, of
riflessione, di
catechesis.
preghiera, di catechesi,
Sometimes,
e molte
however, it is
volte
necessary to
bisogna
take
trovare il
stock of the
punto della
situation. There
situazione.
are
Sono
three
tre
frontiers that I am
frontiere che vi
introducing to you,
anticipo,
announcing,
vi
and then we will
annuncio e
delve
poi le
into each
approfondiamo una
one.
per una. Il massacro di
The
Siria, nel
massacre in
silenzio
Syria, in
generale,
general silence,
purtroppo nel
unfortunately, in
silenzio
inexplicable
inspiegabile,
silence.
perché poi
Because then one
peggio,
wonders why
perché
they are
non
not
ne
talking
parla,
about it,
perché
why
non
it is
se ne
not
sa
being
parlare, perché
discussed,
è
why Trump is
tanto
not intervening
l'interviene
on
su
that.
quello.
He is
Sta
doing a
facendo
lot,
tanto
and it
ed
is
è
commendable.
lodevole
The
il
fact that
fatto
he
che
wants
voglia
to work a
lavorare
lot for
molto per la
peace in
pace
Ukraine,
in
even if there are
Ucraina,
twists and
anche se io
turns,
proprio
because
diceva che
rightly I would say,
giustamente
so
direi,
let's prepare
quindi
for
prepariamoci
everything,
a tutto,
the Kremlin.
il Cremlino ha
They do not
notevole in
benefit
questi giorni
from
in
these
tregua
days of
che
truce
l'Ucraina
that
è
Ukraine is
disponibile
willing to
a
grant.
concedere la guerra
Anyway,
in
in
Siria, nel
Syria, in the
frattempo, non so se lo
meantime,
sapete, ora lo
I don't know if you are
approfondiremo,
aware, we will delve into it
ci
now.
sono di nuovo,
The
sono
Islamic
ricomparsi
terrorists
i
affiliated with
terroristi
Al Qaeda
islamici
have
affiliati
reappeared.
ad Al-Qaeda,
Welcome back,
bentornati
unfortunately.
purtroppo,
Unfortunately, welcome back.
bentornati. Guarda caso,
Coincidentally,
quando
when
Trump
Trump
vuole
wants to bring
mettere la
peace to
pace
the
nel
world,
mondo,
a project always typical
progetto
of
da
the
sempre
Antichrist.
tipico
This
dell'anticristo,
must be
questo
said.
occorre dirlo.
I'm
Non
not saying
sto
that Trump is the
dicendo che Trump
Antichrist.
è
I'm saying that
l'anticristo,
Trump wants
sto
to bring
dicendo che
peace to the
Trump
entire
vuole mettere
world,
pace nel mondo
a
intero,
project
progetto
foreseen by the
previsto da
Antichrist.
parte
I did not
dell'anticristo. Non
say
vi ho
that
detto che
Trump is
Trump è
the
l'anticristo,
Antichrist.
comunque proprio per
In any
quello
case,
in
precisely for that
Siria c'è
reason,
un
in Syria
massacro
there
di
is a massacre
cristiani,
of
bambini
Christians, children
crocefissi alle
crucified
porte
at
di
their
casa, non so se
doorsteps.
sapete,
I don't know if you know,
genitori
parents
strozzati
slaughtered in
dalla
front of
propria
their
figlia
children
per
just
il
for being
solo fatto di
Christians.
essere cristiani,
Because
perché
since Assad was ousted,
Assad è
I
stato
am not an expert on what happens in
estromesso.
the Middle Eastern
Io non
geopolitical
sono un
chessboard,
esperto di quello che avviene
least of
nel
all in the
scacchiere
Middle
geopolitico
Eastern
medio
one, which
orientale,
is
men che
truly a
me, quello
puzzle.
medio orientale che è proprio un puzzle. Però
However, I rise as a
esorto da
Christian and
cristiani
declare, stop the
e dico
massacre, for
fermiamo
someone
il
must
massacro,
act. conflict. While Europe goes to spend 800 billion euros, why does von der Leyen want war? All right, in Syria, children are being crucified. And I have dramatic news. I didn't want to see the images. Don't know about you, but I don't want to. Live crucified people must witness the beheading of their parents simply because they are Christians, because these jihadist cells were kept under control by Assad's regime. Now, however, there is this entire dramatic situation, but we will return to it in a moment. Then there's Brother Celestino's intervention, the response, as only he knows how to do. I didn't hear it, they told me at the trial, to which he will be subjected on the 27th of March. But Fra Celestino does not show up. Or perhaps we go with the marching band and fireworks to be condemned. And finally, there's the issue of poor Cionci'S, who, since he distanced himself from us, says that we are street artists, that we are sectarian schismatics. The only way is the canonical one, but then Cionci'S is now in total fantasy. Regarding the Swiss guards, he makes up an entire story. The MO channel, with which there is no collaboration, may clarify it in the sense that there is no alliance. They are coming to interview us, and in this regard, the director is able to show you the link and the image of the interview, which was conducted with myself and Professor Luca Brunoni. In recent days, and yesterday it was, or last night I think, it already has a significant number of views. In just a few hours, it was presented by the MO channel. This interview, this roundtable with Professor Luca Brunoni, a church historian, and myself, interviewed by the MO channel. Find the links because the production team is not yet able to present them to us. We apologize, but sometimes in the morning you wake up as you wake up, so a little patience is needed. Simply put, and this is a bit of the overall picture. Let's begin now with the massacre in Syria. I invite all of you today in the Holy Rosary to pray for this. Practically, dramatic news is gradually arriving. Approximately 1,000 civilians have died in the western part of Syria in the last 4 days. According to a report provided by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, the violence was allegedly triggered by an attack from a group of supporters of the deposed President Assad against the security forces near the city of Latakia, the area where the majority of the victims are counted. However, at the same time, in Syria, in the general silence, Christian churches are being destroyed and Christians killed. Read. What has happened in these very last days was, in some way, something expected. The loyalists of the old regime were known to rise against the new rulers and the new rulers, as it happened with the attacks on the cities of Latakia, Tartus, and also the nearby villages. However, clearly, it is the Christian minority who is bearing the heavy consequences, for they are paying an extremely high and indeed a dramatically severe price, I would say, alongside the Alawites. Alawites are a religious group from the Middle East of Arab ethnicity, primarily found in Syria. There are also some in Turkey and Lebanon of Shia derivation. As you know, among Muslims there is the difference between Shia and the other reality subjects, who clash with each other. So in Syria, at this moment, we are undoubtedly facing a truly dramatic situation. While recounting, there's a massacre. What are the reasons? It is not easy to reconstruct them entirely. However, 3 months after the fall of Assad, who had to leave for exile, apparently in Russia, Syria is experiencing an escalation of sectarian violence that risks compromising the transition towards a democratic regime. And, as I am repeating my point once again, in this transitional situation, the cells reappear, Islamic or Islamist fundamentalist, which somehow the Assad regime seemed to manage to keep at bay. Unfortunately, in these circumstances, we are witnessing a resurgence of the massacre. And for decades, unfortunately, Christians in the Middle East have been slaughtered alive in general indifference. We are making this appeal break time point 3 today. We pray with steadfast resolve for our Syrian Christian brothers who are continuously targeted, mercilessly massacred, and in the worst possible ways. Can we speak of martyrdom? I truly believe so, because in my honest view, they do not renounce or ever abandon their deeply held Christian faith. To us Western Christians, who for 12 years have accepted heresy and apostasy on the throne of Peter, and the cowardly priests stay in their rectories, there the Islamic troops, when they arrive in the inland villages of Syria, first ask them to renounce their faith, and they would have their lives spared. And many become apostates, very many, others do not. Merits applause once again, Monsignor Carlo Maria Vigano, who has raised his voice. In the face of this massacre, it seems to me that, from the point of view of the names that matter, it's the only voice, so far as I know, that has spoken out about this massacre in Syria. It is a statement in which he says, in recent days, the violence and the mass slaughters, it's a real massacre. We are here to talk about it. This morning, while I was praying the first rosary, my heart was truly heavy, because I was telling the Madonna I will have to speak about it and invite people to pray. But while we are talking about it, they are fleeing the villages. Because after all, one must save one's own skin. You can't just walk into the executioner's arms. Jesus says it, when they persecute you, flee to another city. It is gospel to try to escape death, isn't it? Be careful that when you know the enemy is coming and you flee. St. Augustine made an entire speech about that. Because when the Vandals arrived in Africa, the Arian Vandals arrived in Africa, the Christians were fleeing, they occupied the churches. They asked the saint if this was legitimate, and he replied yes, except that the shepherd, that is the bishop, sees that. Even a single Christ remains, and then the shepherd cannot flee. However, if the Christians now, as it seems, are fleeing, it is still always a massacre. Because where do they go? How do they survive? The International Red Cross and the Red Crescent are making many efforts. They are having many problems in trying to help these people who are fleeing from death. Many flee the worst massacres, yet many fail because there's no proper information. So these 𝐤'𝐸 troops come to you who are real demons. Just look at their faces. They are bloodthirsty. In the name of Allah and Muhammad, they cannot wait to slaughter and behead in 2025 those they consider infidels belonging to the Crusader religion, which would be us Christians. If they find the children, there's no mercy. Because then violence in man becomes fierce. There's something diabolical about it. Read Monsignor Vigano's text. In recent days, the violence and mass killings against Christians and Alawites, those I mentioned, have experienced an unprecedented resurgence, with thousands of deaths. Unfortunately, we do not know the exact number, but we're talking about thousands of martyrs, because they die for not renouncing their faith in all the regions under control. The extremist Islamic movement Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Organization for the Liberation of the Levant, affiliated with the terrorist group Al-Qaeda. The reasons for this persecution of the two minorities, the Wita and Christian, by the Syrian government. So it is the government. Once again, I allow myself to say what I think. You will forgive me for that. Do you remember Gaddafi? The French government, recognizing a broad range of cross-cutting interests, acts decisively, steadfast and resolute, upholding the principles of democracy. Got it? My dear ones, you can't trust anyone. The flags of the nations are all beautiful. The World Cup football championships are the only showcase, in my opinion, perhaps not even a reliable one anymore. Not even that. Got it? There was Sarkozy, who later also had problems, who sent the American fighters against Gaddafi. He did. He incited the people, igniting the fervor of the Arab Spring, fueling events with Mubarak in Egypt, stirring tumult with Gaddafi in Libya, and then even the Syrian Assad was also expected to be deposed. With Assad, they failed. He was already protected by the Russians. What happened in Libya? They took the deposits then, those that matter, and the population that unfortunately is always, alas, unjustly a victim of their own. Because I remember the images of Gaddafi, who was a colorful character. We know that, for goodness sake. But look, he was someone who loved his land, and they took him out in the worst possible way. Now, in Syria, you must know, there are very strong Christian traditions. I shouldn't waste any more time because the topics are different, but it is an important subject. In Syria, you must know that there is a very ancient Christian tradition. Think of Damascus, where Paul goes, right? Think of Damascus and Aleppo, to name just two cities where there are ancient Christian traditions, old Christian ones, with the richness of various liturgical rites, which is not only the Latin Catholic one. An extraordinary applause. The Franciscan friars have it, the Franciscans who have been there all their lives, and the Sisters of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. There is a truly unprecedented frontier of charitable assistance right there in Syria. Now, so Assad has left. This reality has gone to the government that has decided to persecute Christians. So, paradoxically, under the tyrant, quote-unquote, Assad, just like under the tyrant Gaddafi, there you go. I also remember the tyrant of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. Christians enjoyed of a good respect. They removed Saddam Hussein, and the Christians were persecuted. They removed Gaddafi. The Christians killed on the beaches. Do you remember those Egyptians slaughtered whom the Chaldean church venerates as martyrs? There is indeed the liturgical memory, 𝐤'𝐞𝐯. And then do you remember now in Syria there's no more Assad, and therefore it is a massacre of Christians. The removal, says Vigano, of President Balthasar al-Assad, the installation of Abu al-Muhammad al-Yolani, whose party was considered by the American State Department as a terrorist organization. So why is there still no intervention on this? I remind you that the American administration wants the Riviera. They have inevitably led to the genocide that is ongoing against Alawites and Syrian Christians. This genocide is taking place today before our eyes, in the silence of the parliaments, of the democratic nations, and of a Catholic hierarchy subservient to the interests of globalism. In short, no one is talking about it, no one is mentioning it like it happens with us, the small remnant, naturally mutatis mutandis, and the fellowship. No one talks about us. This is incredible. Look, the human being is rotten. However, thank goodness, figures like Vigano, too bad they left. Our Christian brothers, says Vigano, are being barbarically killed in cities and villages. Elderly people, women, and children are crucified at their doorsteps as a sign, as a warning, and massacred solely because of their faith. A faith that decades of compromises and concessions have almost completely erased in Western countries, and especially among their leaders. And while the madness of warmongering by international high finance tries to persuade European nations to finance rearmament against Russia, now we'll see if there's time, but I want to say everything. Today, a video of 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸, if possible, lasts very little, lasts 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes in total, in which 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸, who I think you know, General 𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸, goes to the European Parliament and calls a spade to von der Leyen. 800 million euros and billions of euros for Europe, intended to be invested, represents this significant sum allocated for armament, directed against Russia, as part of our strategic approach. Rightly, Vigano says that all this is happening while in Syria, in general silence, Christians and Alawites are being massacred. It is from the globalist deep state of the United States. This new outbreak of violence and extermination is emerging. I mean Vigano, but I am not able to do this. But he probably believes that this outbreak is driven by the American deep state, which lost at home with Trump. And so from the United States, it must start. We are in complete agreement on this. We are surprised that Trump has not yet done it. An action aimed at ending the genocide of Christians and other minorities in Syria. At their side must stand all those, yes, we heed the appeal of Monsignor Vigano. We are with them too, At their side, alongside these massacred Christian brothers, crucified at their doorsteps, with their throats cut at their side. They must stand, says Vigano, and we are here for that. All those who recognize our Lord Jesus Christ as the only Savior. We cannot remain silent, neither inert in the face of the martyrdom of our brothers. It is our brothers who die for the faith, while here in Italy the priests are ashamed to shout the truth and are afraid. And the Lord chastises them like this. understood?
Capito?
Those who
Quelli che se ne
remain
stanno
hidden in the
rintanati
eternal
nei luoghi
hills.
eterni,
Always
sempre
dear to me was
cauti
this
nel deserto.
solitary hill. Sorry, it's a bit to
È un
lighten
po'
the
per
mood.
sdrammatizzare.
This
Sempre
solitary hill
cauti
was
su
always
questo
dear to me.
celeste colle.
They
Capito?
tend their little
Arrivano
gardens,
in
but why
cielo
don't they
e vedono,
emerge?
poi si allenano
Then
anche
they
tra di loro
ally,
perché
as
l'odio
hatred and
sta
anger
là
toward
nella
Donminatella
Donminatella,
take hold.
rivolta dalle assi,
It
fa
seems to
loro
them that I do not
scivare,
know
che non
these
le so
things.
queste
It
cose.
seems to them that I do not
Scivare,
know.
che non le so,
They
si
ally with
alleano,
each other,
capito? Ma non vengono
but they
fuori.
don't come out.
Capito?
One
Si creano un
exercises and
gruppo e
blesses
esorcista
because
e
he sees
benedisce
the
perché vede
devil
il diavolo
everywhere.
dappertutto. Ieri
Yesterday I
io pensavo
recalled
questa cosa
passing
per
Devil
un po' che
Chaser
si chiamava
Bridge.
scacciadiavoli.
In my opinion,
Secondo me
the sect
qui
should come here,
dovrebbe divenire
the
la
one with the
setta dove
defrocked
il
priest.
prete fuoriuscito.
Another is on the
L'altro si
solitary
prende un
hill and
colle e
celebrates quietly.
celebra
No one disturbs
tranquillamente,
him.
nessuno lo
He has his
disturba, c'ha i suoi
followers.
fedeli.
I am the
Sono il
priest and the
prete, i fedeli che
faithful
non
who do
vogliono
not want
rompere
to be
scatole,
bothered, who
che
want to
se ne
stay in
vogliono stare
peace.
tranquilli.
At 12
Alle
o'clock,
12 la
the polenta.
polenta,
At
alle
7 o'clock, the
19 la
soup. Are
minestrina.
you
Ma
kidding?
scherzi?
I want to be
Voglio
left in
starmene
peace.
tranquillo. Questa
This
è la
is
peggiore
our worst
nostra
antagonist
versione
version.
antagonista.
They are
Sono
priests
sacerdoti
increasingly stepping
sempre
out who are
più
causing us big troubles
riuscita
because they
che
take
stanno
people who
creando
say
grossi
no,
guai
but
perché si
that is
incontrano la gente che dicono no, ma quello è ma
speaking
secondo
about
me è
myself,
estremista, è
it's
troppo
extremist,
difficile
it's too
e così.
difficult,
Noi
it's
ce ne
too much
siamo,
of a
è troppo
protagonist, it's too
protagonista, è troppo
chaotic. We have
troppo
the
caos.
chapel on
Noi abbiamo una
Sundays jokes at
cappella.
10 o'clock, the
La
Mass is
domenica si
live.
alle 10 la messa in diretta
And they
e
have
c'è
about
un migliaio,
1,000,
un migliaio e mezzo di
1,500
fedeli, che
faithful.
ne so
Who
io,
knows?
8,
I am giving an
100,
example.
io
I
non
don't
li
know
so i
them.
numeri, e si
The
celebrano
numbers,
la
and they
loro
celebrate
messa,
their
zitti
Mass
zitti,
quietly,
quati
no one
quati,
disturbs them.
nessuno li
While Brother
disturba, mentre Fra
Celestino has to
Celestino
respond
deve
to the
replicare
Bishop
il
of
vescovo di
𝐓𝐿𝐴,
Cefalù,
of Patti, you see?
scusate, di Patti, capito?
And
Fa
perhaps
sempre
also
quello di
that of
Cefalù,
𝐓𝐿𝐴.
e
Evidently, these
evidentemente
priests
questi
build
preti
themselves
si
up.
costruiscono
Here in
nel
the
corso del
meantime,
tempo i
Christians are being
cristianesimi
massacred
vengono
in Syria,
massacrati in
like us,
Siria,
because there is a
come
physical
noi,
massacre.
perché c'è un massacro
I take
fisico.
responsibility
Io
for what
mi
I
assumo la
say.
responsabilità di quello
I
che
hope
dico,
that Brother
spero che i
Celestino
francesini
and the brothers
confratelli
agree
siano
with me.
d'accordo con me.
There is
E
a
c'è un
moral
massacro
massacre.
morale.
I don't
Non
know what's
so qual è più
worse. We're
doloroso,
all
perché
scared of being
certo tutti abbiamo
slaughtered.
paura che ci sgozzino
The
un
throat,
attimo,
however, at the
però nel
moment the
momento in
cut
cui arriva il
arrives.
taglio,
It's like a
come un
stroke,
ictus,
like that
come quella
person who
persona
fell
che gli è
behind me and
cascata alle
couldn't understand
spalle, non
anything
capiva più
anymore.
niente
Then,
poi,
because
perché doveva
oxygen no
arrivare
longer reaches the
l'ossigeno in
brain.
testa.
Come
E
on, it's a
dai, è
quick
una
death,
morte
all
tutto
told.
sommato rapida.
I know
Lo
I'm
so che non
shocking
sono
you,
volgo,
but with
ma
this
con
quick
questa
death,
morte
even though it's
rapida,
painful, that
così
lasts,
dolorosa,
well, it
che
can
dura per
last. Who
ore,
knows?
può durare, che ne so,
Half a
mezzo
minute,
minuto,
not death,
non la morte,
self-awareness. Because they
l'autocoscienza,
cut you,
perché
the
ti
blood no
tagliano,
longer
non arriva
reaches the
più il
brain,
sangue al
it's over,
cervello, è
but you
finita,
gain eternity.
capito? Però ti
We need to
colpisce
start talking
l'eternità,
like this
bisogna
again.
tornare a
Otherwise,
parlare così, come
Christianity
il
is dead.
cristianesimo è
Von
morto,
Balthasar
aveva
was
ragione
right
Von
if we don't
Balthasar.
start
Se
talking
non
like
si
this
torna
again.
a parlare così, il
Christianity in the
cristianesimo in
West is
Occidente sta
dying.
morendo,
That's
per
why it's
questo sta
dying.
morendo,
And God
perché
provides
Dio provvede
elsewhere.
altrove.
But the moral
Ma il
massacre here
massacro
is no less
morale qui non
problematic.
è
But I
meno
do not have the time
problematico,
to
è la
stop
morte
because
coi
time is a
domani e quel
tyrant.
tiranno.
Let's
Vediamo di
finish
leggere
reading
quello
what
che
𝐕𝐵igano
che
says
dice
and
Viganò
what
e
we
che noi
fully endorse
sottoscriviamo
as
come
a small
piccolo Gesù in
remnant.
pieno.
Have you seen
Quelle
those
scene di
scenes of
violenza
inhuman
disumana le avete
violence?
viste?
Don't
Vi suggerisco di
watch
non
them.
guardarle.
And of
E di
violence, because then
violenza
they
che poi
scream they are
gridano,
martyrs,
sono
but
martiri,
obviously
però
it's not a
non è che è
sweet
una
death.
morte dolce,
They feel the
sempre di
pain, so they
dolore.
scream,
Quindi
shout. It
urlano,
seems they are in
gridano, sembra
despair,
che
but
si
it is not
distendono, ma non
despair.
è
It is the
disperazione, è
scream
l'urlo
of the
del
pain like
dolore
Jesus
come
on the
Gesù sulla
cross.
croce.
Those
Quelle
scenes of
scene di
inhuman
violenza
violence and
disumana e
cruelty
crudeltà
that
che
we see
vediamo accadere
happening
in
in
terre
distant
remote
lands could
potrebbero
tomorrow be
domani
replicated in our
replicarsi nelle
nations,
nostre nazioni,
which the
e il
betrayal of corrupt
tradimento di
rulers has
governanti
caused to be
corrotti ha
invaded
fatto
by hordes
invadere
of fanatical
a orde di
Mohammedans of
fanatici
military age.
maomettani in età militare
To
per
impose
imporre
ethnic
all'Europa la
replacement on Europe
sostituzione
and the
etnica
definitive
e la
erasure of
cancellazione
Christian
definitiva
civilization.
della civiltà cristiana.
I
E
urge
sono gli
Catholics,
cattolici
in
in
these
questi giorni
reflective
di
days of
Quaresima
Holy Lent, to
Santa
pray,
a pregare, a
fast,
digiunare
and
e
do
fare
penance.
penitenza.
Accept the invite,
Accogliamovi con
Monsignor
solidarietà,
𝐕𝐵igano,
anche se
even though
lei
you
è
are unfortunately
purtroppo
a
in sede
𝐶edevacantist,
garantista,
because you
però
are, we nonetheless accept your appeal, because truth, wherever it is spoken, as St. Thomas Aquinas said, is holy. Rightly so, the phrase to pray, to fast, to do penance, to implore heaven. Protection for the persecuted and martyred faithful in Syria, in Gaza. Fortunately, Monsignor Vigano does it. Here, this is being a man. Of conscience, we all know and have known how possible and probable, I would say certain, it is that Vigano is linked to the Trump administration. However, evidently, thank God, there are also faithful Christians and yet Palestinians massacred in Palestine. We do not agree with this. It cannot be just a matter for the international left, in this case the weak one. to defend the Palestinian people. Anyone with a shred of conscience knows that it's no Riviera. It's as if they kick us Sicilians out, the Messenians, the Palermitans, the Trapanis away. We take them to Egypt, or we take them to the Caribbean, and there we create the Riviera. What kind of talk is that? What talk is this? And apparently they no longer have it, apparently not even ridden it. Vigano, in any case, calls for prayer before it's too late, an awakening of the consciences of Christians, a return to God on whom the peace, concord, and prosperity of peoples depend. Deus. Bolt. Carlo Maria Vigano, Archbishop. 12th March 25. This happens while this massacre, which goes unnoticed, occurs in Syria, to our Christian brothers who die for professing their faith in Jesus Christ, while in Italy there are cowards. Here there are the martyrs and there are the cowards, who are the priests. Look, I don't know how many priests there are. They no longer celebrate in union with the so-called now, especially as it is at sunset, or so it seems. Most priests are not convinced by Bergoglio, and many priests do not celebrate, but woe betide anyone who asks them to come out. No way, there's the 8 per thousand, there are those things. And so God provides in another way, because in the meantime, Europe is investing 800 billion euros, because that's what von der Leyen wants. He wants total war, they want war. They've realized nothing comes out of it with the new one. World order, because Trump is not someone who jokes around whether he is right or wrong. He goes his own way. Yesterday I saw a shocking interview. Trump is in 2025. Listen carefully. Trump is at the White House. In the early 20th century, St. Pius X reigned. Di Pietro, calling a spade, in my opinion, has Venetian origins. Calling a spade, calling wine, Pius X. Mathematical, concrete, without beating around the bush. Yesterday I saw a shocking scene, sadly typical in Europe. With the church, that 𝐥'Ecclesiolese beating around the bush, I've fallen for it many times. I still hesitate to speak plainly today, not out of fear but worry they might shut the channel. They asked Trump a question, a journalist, excuse me, Mr. President, in your opinion, President Putin, could he be displeased with your decision regarding the truce with Ukraine? Trump's reply, who? He only has news. For which journalist does he work? Which paper do you work for? The Washington Post told me, you don't know how to work. The next question. This Trump, Pius X did thus. He went straight ahead. Do you know how much time you gain? Here. I don't follow this Vanacci, but that they've pointed him out to me, Iannacci, and the singer who went to the European Parliament. And while in Syria Christians are being massacred, and Russia is portrayed as the #1 danger in the world, let's see if the danger is really that. And while we arm ourselves against Russia, the Muslims do not arrive, because you see that history is in God's hands. Let's hope not, but I wouldn't want that. While France and Germany, Berlin, and Paris ally against Russia, the jihadist cells arrive again. To massacre among us, it's not that we went there a few weeks ago, again in Germany, a madman with a car, another in France. Risk? There is. But let's see what Vanacci said to the European Parliament. These are very strong statements. Publicly, so we are merely reiterating them. Listen very carefully to demonstrate that while Christians are being massacred in Syria, in Europe 800 billion euros are being allocated, which is our money, if I'm not mistaken. It seems that it is our money, the taxpayers. We are still the ones they are allocated to fight against Russia. Here's what Vanacci was saying. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. Mrs. von der Leyen, where's she? Monsignor Costa and your 𝐥'𝐞𝐯𝐤𝐴 Buma, Father von der Leyen. Why is Mrs. von der Leyen afraid of this parliament and invokes Article 122, the state of emergency, to circumvent the only European institution elected by the people, and to indebt us and our children for 850 billion euros to be spent on weapons? And yet, the Russian tanks are not in Warsaw, neither in Budapest nor in Prague. Paris is not burning under a hail of blows. What burns in France are the Christian churches. These are the real emergencies, Mrs. von der Leyen. European families are the ones who cannot make ends meet and do not have the money to pay the gas bills, which have skyrocketed exponentially due to the reckless policies of your Commission. The real emergencies are autarky and dictatorship, and the suspension of democracy, as happened a few days ago in Italy, which the technocrats in Brussels support and endorse. The real emergencies are the attacks and crime and the acts of crime that almost daily illegal immigrants carry out at the expense and to the detriment of European citizens in European nations. These are the real emergencies, Mrs. von der Leyen. Not the fear of seeing a Russian soldier with a fur hat at our doorstep. And come to Parliament and do not be afraid, because here you are not awaited by a platoon of Cossacks with sabers, but by the representatives of the European people who want to have their say about their future. Sometimes it's nice to feel Italian. When we have representatives like this here, who know how to speak like Trump did yesterday at the press conference. Personally, I congratulate Vanacci because, if I may say so, these are things I think too. In France, churches are burning. There is an anti-Christian resentment for which no one does anything. The government lets it happen because it's secularism, gentlemen. It's laïcité. And while mosques are being built in Andalusia, I was shocked to see at the gates of, I don't know which city, an enormous adored mosque. There are Muslim states, hence interreligious dialogue. Sir, and as long as Christianity is persecuted, it is indeed. And this anti-Christian resentment or indifference from these Europeanist or European bureaucrats is a symptom of a Satanist affiliation. This not me. Personally, I have no doubts. Well, let's turn the page today. So we pray for the massacre to be stopped, and we come together. Monsignor Vigano's appeal. Today we offer prayer and reparation with heartfelt commitment to help our Christian brothers in Syria. Look, the Rosary works miracles. We must believe it. We are experiencing it as a small remnant. We will achieve victory. We have no doubts. However, for example, we must not become complacent, for example. There is a need for new volunteers concerning the perpetual Rosary. Please, because some night slots need to be covered. It would not be nice. I therefore invite you to call Simona to fill some slots and perform some services during Lent, waking up at night, taking an inconvenient time, and helping the perpetual Rosary not to be interrupted, because the Rosary works miracles. Today we lose it for Russia, but we certainly also include the Syrians, our Christian brothers in Syria. Let's turn the page. Just yesterday we reported the news. Among other things, I believe that Brother Celestino has been summoned by the Bishop of Patti for a sham trial in which he will likely be condemned. Brother Celestino is well. He is calm, in high spirits, and will likely not appear at this trial. It's useless because it is concocted by a false church that does not have, as I was saying in recent days, the legal authority to do so. Because as belonging to a false post-teleretic pope, it is a schismatic church, and therefore he is excommunicated, unable to excommunicate. Celestino has been silent these days, but today he responded during the Mass celebrated live at 8 in the morning. So it is right that we revisit the decisive passages of this reflection of his, of this evangelical reply of his, as they say, and then on the sidelines. Let's draw some conclusions with a nod to the ever more inexplicable imagination of Dr. Cionci'S. Explainable, him, explainable, those who follow him. But it is the canonical way, gentlemen, that of the Swiss guards who are there, who on behalf of who knows whom. Now in a moment we will delve deeper. Let's air Brother Celestino's piece, then comment. Praise be Jesus Christ. I have several Mass intentions, including one for a woman who died precisely on the 13th of March of, I don't know which year. I will begin with a slightly lengthy parish announcement, and then the sermon, which is almost on the same topic given the day. I have received news from the Diocese of Patti that I should appear, if I understood correctly, for some sort of trial on the 27th of March. I respond through our Radio Domina, even though Father Alessandro has already answered. First, I do not intend to introduce myself. Second, I consider all this unnecessary bureaucracy against an innocent priest a waste of time while the church is burning. Third, I regret not having left Don Rodrigo earlier. Fourth, only those intellectually naive can still consider Don Rodrigo the Pope of the Catholic Church. I repeat, only the intellectually naive can still consider Don Rodrigo the Pope of the Catholic Church. I am certain that I will win against the Diocese of Patti, obviously not alone. These sentences, this is an expression by Don Enrico, are medals of valor for the future. I invite all the priests of the Presbytery of Patti to seriously reflect on who Don Rodrigo is, because by the grace of God there are now hundreds of priests who no longer celebrate in communion with Don Rodrigo, and it is an unstoppable movement, and thousands who know the truth but lack the courage to put it into practice. Leave the 𝐕𝐢𝐵rgoglian sect while you still can. The salvation of souls is at stake. I don't mention Uncle 𝐲𝐿𝐷𝐿 in the Mass anymore, not because of 𝐥'𝐞𝐈. Last thought, it is prophesied that all those who stand against Don Rodrigo will be persecuted. It is better to be among the persecuted than among the persecutors. Then I carefully added another thing. I thank all those who have expressed their solidarity to me. Obviously, I cannot thank you one by one. I especially thank today, which is Thursday, the Sentinels of Bethany. I invite you to pray more and more so that the priests have the courage to leave the 𝐕𝐵rgoglian sect. However, I invite you not to rejoice too much, because the condemnation has not yet arrived. There should be some kind of trial on the 27th of March. I am not going because it is a real farce. Someone would have liked me to go with the band to make fun of them. It would have been nice, but I don't have the time. But there is someone who cannot be fooled, and that is the Lord. God is not mocked, writes St. Paul. If we lived in a time of widespread Catholic faith, I would have invited the Presbytery of Patti to rise up, to throw out from the Diocese of Patti Monsignor 𝐥'𝐵𝐴NCO, why a bishop in communion with Satan if he does not decide to leave Don Rodrigo. Only Satan can change the Word of God. I find myself utterly powerless to act, because I am fully aware that not only the faithful, but even the priests have, regrettably, established communion with Satan. I saw it when for the first time I said something against Bergoglio in the church of Santa Oliva in Pettineo, and some of the faithful immediately called the bishop, and the bishop came to admonish me, leaving me speechless. It was July 2021. I cannot expect myself solidarity from the faithful, the priests of the Diocese of Patti, patience, but I will win. When I say I mean Father Alessandro, the association and the small Catholic remnant, that is, the Madonna. Do not be under any illusions. The current battle is between the devil, well represented by Don Rodrigo, and the Madonna. The Madonna will win. If I am condemned, as I hope, I will also have the imprimatur of not belonging to Satan. Moreover, it will be an honor to be condemned by a porno theologian. I am referring to Monsignor Fernandez. I do not rule out returning to this matter again. This was just the parish notice. Now, the sermon begins, but it's almost on the same topic. Today we remember one of the most tragic days in the history of humanity. That is, the election of Jorge Mario Bergoglio as a false pope of the Catholic Church. On this tragic date, many reflections can be made. I will make the most bitter one. There is the one about priests who do not leave the 𝐕𝐵rgoglian sect. How long, Lord, must this situation last? Why don't they come out? Can I concede that someone is still not too convinced that Bergoglio is not the Pope? Let's talk about those who have reached the inner certainty that Don Rodrigo is not the Pope. Why don't they move? Some are afraid. They are afraid of excommunications, reduction to the lay state, and other forms of persecution. Do not break twint to be afraid. Being persecuted is almost normal for true Christians. Furthermore, I remind these priests that these condemnations are medals of valor for the future. Others think about the 8 per thousand. I won't comment. It's simply shameful. Some others, perhaps a bit more spiritual, think, if I say what I think, they will take away my parish or something like that, and I would have to abandon the flock entrusted to me. This topic is more insidious, but it is false. No one is telling you to abandon the little sheep. You just have to shout that Don Rodrigo is not the Pope and tell it to the little sheep. Let what must be even if the world falls. The truth must be proclaimed. There are priests who do this and are not touched by their bishops, who themselves also have their doubts about Don Rodrigo. Others who barely criticize Don Rodrigo, who is untouchable, because in the false church one can even blaspheme Jesus Christ and the Madonna. And nothing happens. And others like me, Father Alessandro, Don Ramon, and the others, are immediately reached by the mercy of Uncle Ciccio and his partisans, finally Cardinal Fernandez. The little sheep, dear priests, some will follow you on the path to Calvary, and others will prefer the comforts of a Mass, without any value, because it is celebrated in communion with Satan. Anyway, dear priests, the more of us who shout the truth, the more sheep will follow us. Unity is strength. We cannot allow the sheep to remain in deception. We would stake our lives on it. We must shout to the whole world that Don Rodrigo is not the Pope, and that one cannot celebrate Mass in communion with him. Do not look for excuses, because time is running out, and the Church must be saved from this apocalyptic deception. Praise be Jesus Christ. Here it is a homily that we naturally acquire and preserve, because one day these homilies will be history. As long as the priests remain resistant to these appeals of the Holy Voice, humble of Brother Celestino, we do not know. Let's see how, providentially, I did not know the content of this homily, but it fits perfectly with it providentially. With the speech I made about the massacre in Syria, see how God truly guides us. Well, let's hope that Fra Celestino's appeal to the priests is heeded, unless they decide to remain on the sidelines. You see, unfortunately, this is the real concern. My pastoral approach, that is, a new version of resistance which is about not wanting to be bothered of the 𝐥'𝐿. No, I am not with Pope Francis, however. My chapel, my faithful, please send me an email. Tell me who you are. If you don't know how to use email, use your friends. Why the Mass? I celebrate it like a club. I decide who comes to my Mass. This is as contradictory as it gets compared to the objective situation of faith. We arrive at the last point, which concerns, as you know, Cionci'S fantasy is happening. A rather curious and interesting thing that I haven't even had the time to follow. Only God knows I'm honest. I repeat something I have said in recent days and months, that the Cionci'S faction is now in disarray. This is demonstrated by the childish playground tones that some of the 𝐤'Ci'S supporters, whom I regret for him as I actually respect him, are carrying on. I'm told that just this morning, because a 𝐤'Ci'S supporter, look where one can get to, people call and say, "You are the great prelate," to say, no, they call, "I am the one who pays them to call." It is a 𝐤'Ci'S supporter. This is the level, but for heaven's sake, I don't want to. What I would like to say instead is that 𝐤'Ci'S, who had started well, unfortunately we were right to dissociate ourselves from him, because he sees the code everywhere. So he shouldn't be offended if then someone compares him to the code. Brown, why is it ending up like this? For example, the affair of the Swiss guards. I'll get into specifics very briefly. He naturally must have the last word. In fact, he has already responded to the journalist from MO, with whom there is no relationship of complicity or collaboration. I know I'm honest. Then 𝐤'Ci'S and his people can think what they want. It was the journalist who, on her own initiative, I didn't even know about it, she made this response video to what Cionci was claiming. In summary, you know that in these days there have been celebrations for the recovery of Pope Francis, presided over by various cardinals. One of these cardinals celebrated the Mass, and there were the Swiss Guards. Now Cionci has made a video in which, in light of the fact that there were the Swiss Guards, it is the sign. There is an administrator, a regent, those things typical of the Cionci register. There would be a regent, someone, and he identifies, Cionci identifies, what are the criteria to consider that within the Vatican there's the true regent, and they know that Pope Francis is not the Pope. And so it identifies the fact that the Swiss Guards should be only with the Pope. And yet they were present at the Cardinal's celebration. A clue of this thing here. Emo, on his own initiative, God knows if I speak the truth, arranged to call someone from the Swiss Guards General Staff. The video that lasts very briefly should be ready. I kindly ask the production to broadcast the phone call from the journalist of 𝐸MO, his Sardinian channel that deals with current affairs. Catholic, I kindly ask to broadcast the phone call with one of these representatives of the Swiss Guard High Command. Essentially, yes. Can you explain the duties of the Swiss Guards and why? They attended the 9th of March celebration despite the Pope's absence.
Terza missione seguiamo il Santo Padre all'estero, lo accompagniamo nei suoi viaggi all'estero. La quarta siamo i custodi degli ingressi del Vaticano e la quinta e ultima custodiamo il collegio cardinalizio in caso di sede vacante. Perché il 9 marzo c'erano le guardie svizzere sulla piazza San Pietro e perché il governatorato del Vaticano può chiederci un appoggio e siccome il cardinale mi sembra, ha celebrato la messa in nome del Santo Padre, dunque noi appoggiamo anche perché lo celebra in nome del Santo Padre, dunque noi possiamo, noi siamo anche chiamati a fare servizio durante la messa. Alla fine era veramente servizio di sicurezza, tranne
Here, sorry, I gave a thumbs up to indicate to the control room. The control room caught me just as I was asking to. Enough is enough. Practically, as you heard, the journalist from 𝐸MO calls the Swiss Guards to ask why there were Swiss Guards and the Pope wasn't there. And that explains the reasons. But Dr. Cionci must have the last word because he is the best in the class. I remember I had a very annoying classmate, and no one could stand him because he had to be the best. Some live as if they're the best, he replied. And Dr. Cionci responded with a video titled, Why the Explanations of the Swiss Guard Are Not Convincing at All. There is a regent, there is an administrator in the Vatican. Everyone knows Bergoglio isn't the Pope, yet people pray for him. They celebrate Mass, but it is not real. This is Cionci. Just so you know, it's pure fantasy. While Christians are being massacred in Syria and Fra Celestino is being massacred in Italy, the latest in time concerning the sodalizio, there are those who indulge in fantasy and spy stories. Everyone choose where to position themselves. You are doing well, though. Choose carefully, my dears. Good this afternoon. We will see each other at 4 o'clock in Bergamo to pray with the rosary in hand. Let's intensify the prayer. Please don't do it. I'd be upset. Very bad that the perpetual rosary is suspended because you do not write at the most inconvenient times. Those you must choose and offer them with love to the Lord by day and by night. Contact Simona because this is the time to intensify prayer, not chatter.